too heavy.
Okay. Yeah, because I feel like, yeah, it's not, I don't know, I feel like when you do like panel discussions like this, the questions kind of become quite heavy because of like, literally because of the intersection of being Black and queer, but like, there's a lot of joy in that too, actually. I don't know, it's always nice to explore that as well, so, yeah.
I think we're live. So I'm going to introduce myself. I'm Alaska, I'm 21. I'm an actress and writer from London. I identify as bisexual and non-binary. And I'm going to be hosting today's intersectional panel, which is on being Black and queer, my two favourite pastimes. So if we could go around, everyone introduce themselves, say your name, your pronouns, and just a little bit about yourself. Gavin, go and introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'll start. My name is Gavin. My pronouns are he, him. I'm a third year international relations and history student at SOAS. I am a Black queer man, and I also like run events to do with like being Black and queer. So most sort of recently like a few panel discussions or panel discussion series at SOAS to do with being Black and queer. Also the educational director for a youth organization that basically works to support Black queer young people. So yeah, it's a little bit about me.
Awesome. Dee?
Hello, my name is Dee. My pronouns are they, them. I'm a recent college graduate who's in the middle of going to working on getting to law school. I'm a pretty adamant activist, and I'm Black and queer. I'm non-binary, and so a lot of my life is surrounded around explaining what that means. Yeah, I'm really grateful to be here.
Awesome. So I think we just start off kind of breaking down intersectionality, and do the intersections of Black and queerness go hand in hand with you guys, or do they feel separate? Do they feel like different entities? Because I think for me, I definitely experienced like Black culture through a queer lens. Does that make sense? Like I've never been to Nigeria, I've never been to the Caribbean, but how I experience my Blackness is through my queerness. Does that make sense? Would you guys like say it's the same, or is it something completely different?
So I think for me, it's very similar to yours, where it's my Blackness is through my queer lens. I want to say my queerness is through my Black lens, actually, because I grew up thinking I was a cis, straight person. And then I got to college and got introduced to all this gratefulness that is queer, being queer. And so the two of those things intersected pretty late in my life. But because of that, I feel like I had the chance to experience kind of like Blackness before my queerness. And it kind of has now developed into one thing. It's just like whatever my Blackness is, my queerness is also there. And that creates a lot of, I would say there are quite a few boundaries that I have to set in order to have those two things exist peacefully and at the same time in the same room with a lot of different people. Yeah, so I think they've melded now, but in the beginning it was definitely a separate entity for both of them, I think.
I feel like that's so interesting, and I think that's maybe a cultural thing, is that like living in England, my Blackness felt, and being mixed race, my Blackness felt incredibly alien to me. Like I just felt massively disconnected. Yeah.
Yeah, I would want to sort of echo what Dee said and just say like for me a lot of when I was younger, I think I've always kind of known that I was queer. I've always kind of known, well, I've always known that I was Black. And I don't know, it's just difficult to be able to like, when I was younger anyway, it's difficult to be able to navigate those two spaces. They felt like very separate spaces for me. And it's actually only quite recently, so in the last like year or so, that I have started seeing how those two identities have actually do meld together very well, and how those two identities are a part of me as opposed to sort of like two individual aspects of me, but how they make up the whole, if that makes sense. Yeah, and I think, yeah, it's one of those things where actually growing up and experiencing different things and actually being in rooms full of queer Black people, I can see how much those identities actually work with each other, as opposed to how sort of I felt somewhat alienated or different, like sort of otherized from them. Yeah.
I love that you like bring up the idea of like being in the room and like being in rooms with like Black queer people. Growing up, how did everyone kind of come to terms with their queerness and navigating that through different spaces, like whether it be at school or within the queer community or just in the workplace or in general? Because I think for me, there are definitely, especially in London, there are spaces that are specifically for BAME and queer. But when I'm not in those spaces, I'm like, oh my goodness, my heart's beating a little bit faster. I'm the only brown person. What am I doing here? Do you guys ever like feel that at all, or have been in those spaces?
Okay, Gavin, do you want to start? Okay, so I grew up as a cis person, but I never really fit the mold of what a cis person was. Like I was like the classic like tomboy, and like I liked playing with the guys more than the girls because of the internalized patriarchy and all that fun stuff. And so for me, being queer was like off the table. Like I grew up in a household where it was like, if you were queer, it's like getting disowned. At least that's the message they sent me growing up. And so like I didn't do any searching into who I was because of the fear of being disowned by my family. And so when I got to college, I started to discover who I am, and like I found out that I was queer and that it's a beautiful thing and that it's something that should be celebrated. And so because of that, I found it pretty difficult to be a queer brown person in a space where there's no other queer brown people, especially at work. One thing that I struggled with a lot was getting my pronouns used correctly, and that caused a lot of strife in a lot of my workplaces. And there were often times where I would shy away from how queer I was just to keep the peace, basically, if that makes sense, and to just like not stir the pot, because like my anxiety would be like, well, we don't need to do that right now, or like maybe it's not that important. But I realized as I got older that it's super important for me to respect my queerness and respect my brownness, and to not let people take advantage of that, or see it as a weakness or anything, because it's not a weakness. It's being Black and brown and being queer are three of the most beautiful things you could possibly be as a human, I feel like. And it took me a while to learn that. So for a while, working and I went to a school that was pretty queer, that had a really good queer following and queer community. So in college, I surrounded myself with people who were queer. So that's what I knew for 4 years. And then I got back put into like the real world, and it's so different. And it's like, I have to figure out how to navigate again with being in all white spaces, or being in like all cis straight spaces. Like I'm still figuring that out, but it's been a journey for sure.
I think for me, I've been in a lot of queer spaces before and a lot of Black spaces. So like similar to what I was saying earlier about having those identities separate, but never sort of seeing them meld together. So I used to do like debating in school. Don't ask me about that, please. And actually, sort of all of the debaters that I would meet, a lot of them were queer. So I kind of was introduced to a lot of like queer spaces quite young, and had quite a few like LGBT friends, but not necessarily sort of like Black queer friends in particular. And so for me, actually, I took part in a campaign last year, I think, called Me, Him, Us, which is it was ran by the GMFA, and it basically is a campaign looking at sort of spreading awareness of HIV amongst gay and bi Black men, or men of color. But the one I took part of was specifically to do with gay and bi Black men. And yeah, I took part of that, and I literally walked into this room and realized I was in a room full of like queer Black men, and was a little bit like, this is kind of like the first time that I've kind of experienced that, it was crazy. It was completely weird. Like, it was wild to me. I'd never actually set foot in a like eureka moment of, wow, this is something that oh, sorry, I think my connection's a bit weak. Yeah, just like a eureka moment for me. So it was a little bit like I could actually do this. I could actually go into these spaces and be comfortable in these spaces. And then from that sort of found more of those spaces. Another thing I'd say that not necessarily having those spaces when I was younger was a bit of a problem for me in the sense that I think I became quite complacent. So rather than actually challenging a lot of things and a lot of the issues that I saw in regards to either like my blackness or my queerness, I think I just kind of like definitely internalized a lot of that, but also let a lot of things run when I shouldn't have done that. So I remember I was quite young and I remember for some reason someone painted my nails in the school one day, and this is like I was quite young, so I was like primary school maybe. And I remember being in my sister's car. She must have been driving me home, and she turned around to me and said, "Oh, what's that on your nails? Like, take it off immediately. Like, it's da 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 whatever." And I have that memory, but for me, I just remember feeling really like shameful and guilty, like I'd done something wrong, but actually it was literally just wasn't even like a symbol of anything to do with like anything that I enjoyed doing or like I had. I mean, I was too young to be able to challenge that, but even now I think it's difficult to have those conversations as a result of that. So I think me not necessarily having those spaces has meant that I have found it difficult to actually challenge and target and sort of tell people when their views aren't necessarily basically aren't necessarily correct in that way. But yeah, I think now having those spaces, I'm gaining more language to be able to do so. I'm actually meeting people and talking to them and developing my own ideas. Which is quite nice.
Gavin, I think your connection has gone. Oh, are you back?
Hello?
Hi. I think your connection was a bit
Is it
iffy
quite
for a
shaky?
second.
Oh,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. There's not much I can do.
But definitely, I think a lot of points that you brought up is the idea of kind of minimizing yourself within spaces that are not specifically Black and queer, which I think kind of comes into code switching in some ways. I definitely find myself doing that a lot. But also like the importance of having those spaces is just so integral. Like it's like being able to breathe. And without that, it's like the chest is just so tight wherever you go. And so I think the thing within the community, definitely, I feel like there's a view of like, you're either doing the most and you're doing too much, or you're just minimizing your identity. And like, you're ashamed for like either one. So I don't know whether people agree, disagree, but I feel like that's my take within like navigation spaces.
Should I start?
Sure.
Okay. I definitely find myself minimizing my existence in spaces that aren't brown and queer. And I find that recently I've been able to combat that a little bit. I think the more, like Gavin mentioned, the more I was surrounded with queer people and brown people who gave me the language to speak about my existence in a way that other people could understand, that really helped me stand up for myself a little bit more. And that's not to say that, because it's hard. It's definitely difficult to take up space when your entire life you were told to minimize how much space you take up. So it's been a learning experience for sure, learning when to speak up, because I feel like there's often times when there's like for me, when I work in a store, I work in retail. So like my coworkers all know my pronouns and they all know who I am, but the people I serve most of the times do not. So it's like I don't bother correcting people who I only see on a one-time basis, you know, because that's just a lot of energy that I don't want to expend. But when it comes to, I do hold the standard up for people in my life to respect me and to just give me the same respect that they expected back as well. And so that has definitely, and having that support has definitely helped me be able to do that in places that aren't just in my family. And when I say family, I mean like I have a really great chosen family who through them I've learned how to take up space in a healthy way, but also how to empower other people to take up space in a healthy way. Because I feel like if someone's helping me get somewhere, I want to help somebody else get there somewhere as well, you know. So I found it. I'm learning less and less to minimize myself, but I think I still have a ways to go before I'm fully comfortable taking up space when I'm supposed to take space up. Yeah, I've definitely learned how to not do that anymore, but I'm still working on that, I think.
I definitely feel like I'm going to be learning how to take up space like my whole life.
I think so too.
It's a learning curve that you just go through.
Yeah.
Gavin, do you find yourself minimizing or doing, as like people would say, too much? I hate the idea of like doing too much and being too much, and I feel like that's definitely something that's thrown upon Black queerness.
May I say one more thing? Sorry. I learned recently, taking up too much space. I learned that you never take up too much space for the right people. So when you do find the people who are like important, they will never think you're too much. So I just wanted to let people know, like, that's a thing. This is a thought process I've had, you know?
No, I love that.
No, I definitely echo that as well, actually. I think the idea of taking too much or doing the most and all of that, like, yeah, as Alaska said, is literally is kind of like targeted towards like Black queerness. And like I think it definitely comes from the idea that like obviously everything in society is built to silence us in some sort of way. So the second we are saying anything, the second that we are speaking up, the second that we are challenging what is like what we know to be like gender identity or expression, all those sorts of different things, then I think people immediately take that as a sort of like attack basically, and then you're doing too much by sharing like posts on Instagram or Twitter or Facebook or whatever. You're doing the most. You're trying to like convert people to like the gay agenda or whatever, but it's like actually no, we're just trying to educate people so that I don't have to walk down the street and feel horrible about myself when I'm holding my partner's hand. It's very simple things like that I think a lot of people don't see it in those ways, but literally see it as an attack. And yeah, again, it comes down to like I think this idea of being othered, so like people literally will look and feel like something that's different for them is attacking their very way of life, when actually no, we can coexist quite happily. But yeah, in terms of feeling like I'm doing too much, I think for me, I think that I don't think of it in regards to doing too much for others. I think of it in regards to doing too much for myself. So a lot of the time, I find it quite difficult to put my phone down, actually. Like I'm always on my phone. And I realize that is a massive detriment to me, because I'm always seeing, like, I'm just always taking in the information that I'm being given online, which is literally like, I mean, in this day and age, not very nice, to be fair. So it's like, I think for myself and like the idea of doing too much, I think that I need to like actually allocate time to just be and just focus on myself and not sort of like try to constantly educate other people about certain things. So like, I think that's where I would say that I do too much in that regards. But yeah, in terms of minimizing myself, I think also, yeah, I definitely do. I think it's a case of what, like, as I've gotten older, I've changed how I navigate spaces and yeah, online spaces as well. So I think as I've gotten older, I sort of, I don't necessarily think of me doing things as a problem for others. So like, for instance, sharing posts and stuff like that, I think that that is just like the bare minimum I can do in order to sort of like let someone might see it and actually know, like actually try to like research more about like Black queer issues, for instance. So that's kind of what I try to do. So I won't ever stop speaking up on those sorts of things now, especially that I've had to like unlearn a lot of problems for myself and actually sort of think about where like my own biases and stereotypes have come from. And yeah, because I've had to like do some work in regards to that, I think that there's no amount of work that is too much for me, if that makes sense. But yeah, that's kind of where I would sort of situate myself in terms of that.
What makes everyone feel either distant or close to specifically the queer community as Black queer people? Because I think there are times where I just feel completely alienated, or I'm like, this is my home. And either finding that space online or in person is like looking for lost treasure sometimes. So I was just wondering how everyone feels about that, like either feeling close or feeling distant to the community as a Black
person. So I definitely 1,000,000% feel or have felt and do feel to an extent distant from the quote unquote queer community. Just because I think a lot of spaces aren't made for Black queer people. And like I have this conversation with people on a regular. A lot of spaces are made specifically for white people in mind. On top of that, we're now like, obviously people are now being taught about like LGBT issues. People are now like actually sort of doing work to sort of like learn what it means to be queer and that sort of thing. So there are now actually quite a few like different queer spaces, but within those, Black queer people are systematically forgotten and actually basically taken out of those spaces, which is for me quite harmful. Like I don't want to be in a space that I'm not invited to or that I don't feel welcomed in. And I think that's another thing that people don't necessarily understand. So like personally, I feel quite distant from like the queer community as a whole in regards to that. Like for instance, I don't watch RuPaul's Drag Race, and people drag me for not watching RuPaul's Drag Race, which doesn't make sense because I'm just as queer, just as gay as the next person. Like it doesn't. I don't understand why people have the need to sort of like box you into categories in terms of like, as in even within your own community, box you into categories.
policing your queerness. Like, why? Who is that for? Why are you going to police my queerness?
Literally.
It's completely bizarre.
It just doesn't make any sense. And actually, it just serves to, again, like I said, it just serves to make me feel more distance from my own community. But yeah, in terms of like feeling close, I think, like I said, like that's just come from me having to actually take time to look for spaces that do invite me to actually go to events and actually specifically try to talk to more Black queer people and try to actually invite more Black queer people into my life, basically, which is the only way that I feel kind of more connected to my community. And I think I've necessarily found a community in that sense. But yeah.
Speaking on what Gavin said about finding like Black queer community, I feel the most disconnected from my community when I'm just surrounded by white queers, because there's a whole level of information they will never understand, like that relate to me being Black and queer at the same time. And so for me, it's very frustrating because the areas I've lived in so far have been majority white. And so finding even straight Black people or like non-queer Black people has been really difficult for me. So for the last few years since leaving college, actually, I've been feeling less and less connected to my queer community because of the lack of access I have to Black folk and Black queer folk. But when I did have access to it, it was that having those kind of people in my life is what helped me feel queer and helped me feel better as a queer person more so. I was able to explore my identity with people who were more like me and get to know like how they explored their queerness, and then Matt gave me ideas as to how to explore mine. And that was when I did most of my growth as a queer person, was when I was able to like bounce ideas off of people like me, and I was able to factor in their experiences with mine, just so I know like how to deal with future experiences and such like that. But as of late, it's been pretty tough to communicate, especially like even on the online spaces. I find it hard to find like a lot of like the Facebook pages that I find, or like the Instagram pages that I find, are like Black, like are white queer kids, or non POC queer kids, and it's like I don't really need that kind of exposure anymore. So I'm still looking for ways to find, like, it's very hard to find like Black non-binary folk, that binary folk online in like their own little groups. Oftentimes it's like you have to like dig and search and like change whatever you're searching for to find anything that can relate to me, and that's been really frustrating. But I'm hoping that in the future I'll be able to find something that, or even if I had to create it myself, like create something that's available for other people like me who don't have the resources that I've been looking for, you know? But that the lack of spaces for me to be comfortable in is what has made me feel a lot less disconnected, a lot more disconnected to my queerness recently. Yeah.
I think that was really interesting how kind of everyone definitely mentioned a disconnect. And I think it's basically only in the last couple of years, I would say particularly for London where I'm based, there are spaces like Pussy Palace that do things that are like POC specifically and that create those spaces. But before that, it was like, where was I? I was in like, I shall not name names, but like kind of queer clubs where everyone is white, everyone is really privileged, really elite, like really wealthy, and just has no clue what I'm experiencing and feeling just so disconnected. But then on the opposite end of just like seeing, definitely with the rise of Black Lives Matter, seeing Black voices in the media is just so important. And why for everyone here are Black queer voices and representation important? It's particularly like when you're growing up, because I don't remember seeing any Black queer people. Maybe like one L word character.
Yeah, this one is really interesting. So like I said, like I've always known that I was queer, I've always known that I was Black, but those two identities didn't match together. And I think part of that is because growing up, I wasn't exposed to Black queer characters or authentic Black queer characters anyways. I remember when I was quite young, I can't remember how old, like probably like sort of like secondary school, like early secondary school, so year 7 to 9, I found out about a TV series called Noah's Ark. And I, to this day, I still haven't watched it, but specifically I haven't watched it because I don't want to basically watch it and then run out of all the representation that exists of me on TV. So I'm kind of just like saving it for a particular moment. I don't know when, at some point, that I will decide to watch it. Maybe what I'm waiting for is actually to see more faces that look like me on TV, basically. But yeah, I think that I definitely needed and could have used more visual representation of Black queer characters, whether that's on TV, whether that's just generally in like media and news outlets, like or even just like even like in schools. Like I literally could have definitely used that. Yeah, because I went through quite a lot of hardships by virtue of being both Black and queer. Some of it because, like, literally some of it because of my race, some of it because of my sexuality, some of it because of both, and didn't necessarily have anyone to talk to about it. And the only people that I could have spoken to about it didn't quite get it because they didn't belong to those identities or weren't able to basically empathize with me in a way that I needed to. So yeah, so I think yeah, like representation is definitely incredibly important. But not only is it important, but also I think we need to have authentic representation, because I don't know if any of you've watched Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt, but you have like Titus in that, who, as much as he's a very funny character, he's also like the walking stereotype of what everyone thinks it is to be gay or be queer or whatever. which for a lot of people that isn't their reality. People don't always aren't always as like, yeah, just aren't always as tight as characters, basically. Like, I think that there's a lot of different variations within being Black and queer, or within being queer, or within being Black, that I think need to be given representation to as well. And yeah, like I think that we're getting on the way to that with things like Pose as well, actually, which is quite nice. But yeah,
Definitely. I remember in like early 2010s, there was like a UK show called Cucumber, and one of the only Black queer character straight up murdered. Like, it's completely shocking. I don't think I've ever forgiven the writers for doing something as such. The idea of like, well, we're going to have Black queerness, but you know, we'll take it away and it will be done violently. Just seeing that within the media as a teenager, I was like, okay, so if I'm Black and queer, I might die.
literally, like that's literally the other thing, is that I think, yeah, like we just don't think about the authenticity of these characters, or like actually what the story is being told says about these characters, or says about like what these people are like. It's crazy. There's not enough thought that goes into it, and you can always tell like a Black queer character that's written by a Black queer person as opposed to a Black queer character written by absolutely anyone else, because yeah, like that authenticity doesn't exist. Yeah.
Are there any cultural differences when living in America with Black queer representation?
Cultural differences. I'm not entirely sure. I know that in the US, queer people are still hated. And we have a person in power who endorses that. And it's terrifying. There have been oodles of murdered trans women because there's been a spike since he came into office. And because of and I think a part of that is because there isn't any, besides Pose, like I don't know of any like queer, of any trans shows that show like what trans people are actually like not like whatever they show in porn or whatever they show in like transvestites on like on like sitcoms and stuff. Like that's kind of representation people have of queer people, is through sitcoms or through whatever miscellaneous things you could find. I didn't have any queer representation growing up. All the only people I knew were queer were men. That was the only representation. As far as I knew, the only people who could be queer were men. It wasn't until I got to high school that I discovered that women could be queer as well. And it wasn't until I got to college to discover that there are people who aren't men and women who could be queer. And I would definitely have appreciated having some kind of representation earlier, just so I could have discovered who I was sooner and struggled a lot less, because I didn't fit into any boxes growing up. I was very much like a floater kid, meaning like I didn't have a set group of friends. I didn't stick with one thing. I had liked a bunch of different things. And I struggled a lot with who I was growing up because I didn't know. I just knew that I wasn't a lady, as everyone had loved to call me. I wasn't a bro, because no one endorsed that. And it was like, when I did find out that non-binary existed, there was such pressure like lifted off of my shoulders, and there was a time of fear because I had to like come to terms with it. I thought like growing up thinking one thing and then getting to like 19 and figuring out something completely different was a little bit of a culture shock for me, a shock for me. And so it took me a while to accept who I was, but when I did, it just made everything so much easier for me on a daily basis. And so I feel like Black and queer representation is not only important, it's necessary. Because if I had a hard time growing up, imagine someone who didn't grow up on the coast. Like the coasts of the states are pretty progressive, and whereas the middle of the states are like they live in like 1940 sometimes. So I would love for there to be representation for kids who don't have access to New York City or California or San Francisco. Like, I think that if we had that, and even not just for queer kids, like if we could normalize what queer people are like in television, and people will see that as a normal thing instead of seeing it as some like taboo out there ideology, you know? And so I think that representation could save a lot of lives. I think that would help out a lot of people in a lot of different ways.
I wish I had had any, like a smidgen of representation growing up. I think kids these days, I just don't know. They're so lucky. They're so lucky they have characters like, you know, Rob from High Fidelity, who is brown and bisexual, Heartsy Out Loud. I saw that and I was like, yes, that's me.
Yeah.
So they get that gift, and I'm so happy for them.
If you need some more queer representation, Steven Universe is a really cute kids show, and most of the characters are in there are like lesbian women, and it's like, and there's like a black, the representation is really good in the show, and it's very cute, and it's like it's a kids show, so it's like it's normalizing that for kids. It's like, if you love each other, you love each other, and that's it. And I think that show really is showing a lot of people that like it's not this weird taboo thing that needs to be like whispered under like, and like it's good. It's a good show.
Definitely, I mean, I grew up watching Adventure Time, and then, you know, the finale ended as I was turning 20, from age 10 to 20, watching that and kind of seeing a queer relationship that was very much open, not sensitive at all, was great. I think on a slightly lighter note, what does Pride look like for both of you, just specifically as being Black and queer? I think it's a little bit of a coin for me of like kind of avoiding commercial pride as much as possible, but then also like going to other spaces with like your chosen family and having the best time.
Sorry, what does what look like to me? I didn't hear
Pride.
you. Pride?
Yeah.
Okay. I guess I'll start. Pride is, it's safety for me. Being proud of who I am is part of my self-care. It's part of me accepting who I am and telling other people that I accept who I am. That I don't need anyone else's opinion on who I am. It's just for me, and I am proud of this, who I've become, and who I am, and that's. I think it's a beautiful thing, and I think that the more we can allow people, the more we have spaces where people can feel prideful, the stronger we get as a community. And I know that there's pride all over the world, and that's beautiful. And I think, but I think pride should exist outside of the month of June. I don't know if y'all do it in June as well, but our month is in June, and I think that's great. It should be always celebrated, but I think we also need to bring pride into like every other month of the year, and have that be there for people so they can say, well, I don't have to wait until this one time a year to be myself. I can be myself anytime I want to be. And I think that if we could draw out how long our pride lasts, like vocally and like in a physical sense, I think that would, again, like make it safer for people to be themselves and allow people to learn who they are a lot quicker and a lot safer and a lot smarter and easier. Yeah, but pride for me means safety. It means taking control of who I am and who I want to be and who I strive to be.
I love that you said pride as self-care. I really am going to take that with me. I just think that's amazing.
Yeah. Because it's like, when you aren't proud of who you are, it's much easier to self-deprecate. It's much easier to downplay your emotions. It's much easier to downplay your feelings. But when you get to the point where you're like, I can think a certain way and be firm in that decision of thinking that way, it kind of like solidifies something in your brain that says, okay, this is a good feeling. Let's try and be feeling this good, like as much as possible. And so I think, again, like as I said, like it's a form of loving yourself. And I think that's super important in this day and age, just to love yourself as much as you possibly can.
Pride for me means avoiding Trafalgar Square.
I agree, 100%. Please expand on that for everyone.
No, if I'm honest, let me actually be truthful on this one. So I actually do quite like Pride season. What I don't like is the commercialization of Pride. I think last few you actually earlier just spoke about it, but yeah, just the fact that that pride has to require like such a large police presence, has to, every single business in the world suddenly supports LGBTQ plus rights. Everyone suddenly can see color, and the color is a rainbow. And it just feels very forced for me. And it doesn't, it, as much as you were saying that pride is about being safe, it doesn't feel safe for me emotionally, I'd say. And actually, it feels like a space or a time where I have to be on guard in a way, because people, in the same way, I think it's very similar to like Black History Month in that, in these aspects, but that people will ask me to work and do things for free without paying me. People will also will literally, like, people that have literally said like really homophobic things to my face will turn around and say, "Whoa, it's pride. Here's a pride filter on like my profile picture." I think those sorts of things just again are just completely inauthentic. Just don't mean anything to me. And yeah, it's ultimately it's just for clout. It's to be able to say that you're a good person because you recognise that LGBTQ plus people exist within this 1 month. Which, yeah, like I said, it has parallels to Black History Month in regards to that. That being said, I do also think pride is powerful. I do think that, as Dee was saying, having pride in yourself is a form of self-love, it's a form of self-care. It's a powerful thing that allows you to access knowledge, to access like literal strength, to access empathy, all those sorts of things that I think that is for everyone, not just for queer people. And I think that Pride as an event does allow people to do that. So it opens up the door, it gives people access into what it means to be LGBTQ plus, and what exactly that means from a joyful perspective, as opposed to kind of the stuff that we're like fed quite a lot of, which is like sort of like the negatives of it. So I guess that's where pride is powerful, but equally, as I said, like it's also very problematic. So yeah, so pride is powerful and problematic in my opinion. But yeah, as we we're talking about spaces earlier, I think that things like UK Black Pride, and yeah, like you were saying, like Pussy Palace, Queerbrook, that aren't limited to specific events within like one specific month, but actually happen throughout the year as well. Those sorts of things again are so important. And yeah, for me, I think it's really it's a safe haven. It's literally a safe haven. It's a place you can go to completely to unwind and to just be yourself and to just be happy and be joyful and yeah, like cry, laugh, run, jump, do whatever you want basically in those spaces. And that's what I think true pride is for me.
I definitely agree. I think as soon as we can remove the capitalism aspect of pride, does it then kind of go back to its original roots of being a protest, which is what pride will always be. So I think for the last 15 minutes, we've actually got some questions then. So we're going to do like a Q&A with all of us. So question 1 is, Gavin, earlier you put queer community in quotes. Do you think as such as a monolithic community exists, especially when mainstream queer communities, queer spaces exclude Black and brown people?
Wait, sorry, could you just repeat that? Sorry.
So I think someone's saying, you said queer community in quotes. Do you think that, like, it exists, especially when it excludes Black and brown people?
Okay. Well, no, I don't think it does exist. I think that the queer community should literally should incorporate everyone, or not everyone, but everyone who is queer. So that is Black and brown people as well. If I don't feel accepted by that community, which is supposed to be my own, for me it doesn't exist. I don't have to look at it or engage with it or interact with it in any kind of way. Yeah, and also like what it means to be queer, I think for me that is all about love and acceptance, regardless of regardless of certain things. So actually within that as well, if because of the color of my skin you can't accept me, you can't love me, you can't show me what I need to be shown, you can't engage with me on level that I need to engage with you, you can't sit there and think about why you think certain things, then for me that isn't the queer community. The queer community is anything that can actually do those things for me. So yeah, to me it doesn't really exist.
Our second question is, conversations around being Black and queer often centre around trauma. Is this ultimately helpful? I think it's a little bit of a yes and a no kind of thing. I think definitely kind of looking back at Black queer history, and there is trauma in that, is ultimately important, but it is simultaneously exhausting for me personally. I don't know about you guys.
Can you repeat the question, please?
So conversations around being Black and queer are often centered around trauma. Is this ultimately helpful?
I think it's important to talk about trauma. I think there should be certain times for when we talk about trauma. I feel like not every conversation about Black and brown, Black and queer, or person of color and queer community identities should always be associated with trauma at the same time, but it is important to acknowledge it and to address it so that you can move on and heal. So I think that as long as we're also having conversations about the positive parts of being queer and brown and Black, we're talking about that as in the same amount of in the same quantity as we're talking about trauma, or even more so if we can, because that way it's not just a negativity that's surrounding being these identities. It's not just, oh, my life is so hard because I am these identities. It's instead it brings in also I've experienced these things because I'm just how I identify, but at the same time I've also gained this as because of how I identify. So I think as long as there's a balance between talking about it too, it can be helpful. But I feel like if we only ever talk about the trauma and the bad things about that come with being who you are, then it could become a negative thing, or less helpful and more harmful. But if we can find a balance, I think it could be very helpful to do both.
So, my next question is, are there any high-profile Black queer people that you look up to that you should follow? You're on mute.
I was going to say I can give you a list.
Gavin, go with your list.
Tanya Compass is such a absolute force and a personal fave of mine. She is really one of the reasons that I have been able to be comfortable and sort of like going to spaces and actually, like go into places and just feel comfortable. For those who don't know, she's the founder of Exist Loudly, which is a charity which basically looks at supporting and running events for queer people, queer Black people. So she's recently kind of embarked on that journey, and she's definitely someone that you should follow. Another person who I really look up to as well is Phil Samba, who is he works for Team Pratchett. He's sort of like a sexual health advocate in London as well. And again, the Me Him Us campaign that I actually took part in, I actually walked into the room and was like, oh my gosh, I'm surrounded by so many incredible Black queer people. The only reason why I ended up doing it was because I had met him at a panel discussion before it, basically. So I actually have a lot of respect and love for him. Those are the two people that I'm gonna plug for now.
So I have just like three people. So the first one is Lena Waithe. If you don't know her, she is a producer slash writer slash performer who has brought a lot of attention to the queer community. her, and then Willow Smith is someone I really look up to because of her journey to being queer, and her journey with, she kind of inspired me to delve more into being non-binary with how she addresses it and such. And so I look up to her a lot. And then India Moore, if y'all don't know her, she's she plays Angel in Pose. She's this beautiful woman who's an activist, and she has been pretty forefront with the support of the movements from the last year. And I look up to her because she's overcome so much. And I can only imagine how tough it has been as a trans woman to get to where she is today. And I'm just really, those kind of people like inspire me to fight every day to overcome the struggles that I have as a brown and queer person. But yeah, those are my three.
I'm going to plug in some media. So I would definitely listen to Galdem's podcast. They're amazing. They're a Black, queer, kind of non-binary and femme space, and they just kind of interview people, and they're awesome. And Kizzy Palace, because everyone loves to follow. Another question: what aspects of queer culture have you felt like you've been barred from due to being Black, and vice versa?
Is that what aspects of queer culture do I feel I've been barred?
Like you feel barred from being Black, or vice versa?
I would say definitely clubbing is one thing, or like going out, basically, like having spaces like that. It's literally only in the last year and a half that I've been able to have those spaces through things like Pussy Palace and Queer Brock. And yeah, prior to that, I didn't really have those spaces because they were all sort of like white spaces. So it's like Heaven or JY, which for me at that point, like me growing up, that was kind of the space that I had. I say me growing up, obviously 18 plus, don't drink underage, kids. But yeah, like I think, yeah, sorry, I lost my train of thought. Yeah, those spaces are definitely very important, I think.
So as a queer person, I come from a Caribbean household, and my Caribbean parents are, and my family so far are not the most accepting of queerness. So oftentimes when I do see family, I have to put on this facade. Like I know, like I don't hide who I am in the slightest, but I also like don't have the energy to combat 20 people at a time misgendering me and misnaming me and all that fun stuff. So oftentimes it's hard to be queer in my Black communities. At least family wise, my chosen family is amazing, but like a family, like blood family wise, it's been rough being a queer person in that situation. And then being queer, I guess the lack of, I guess like you said, what like Gavin said about like going out, like a lot of the places that I go to that started off as brown and Black are now just overrun with white people, and like not even often just like queer white people, like straight people come to our bars now, and they take over the entire thing, and it's like they're pushing us out of places to go, and it sucks, but I think they're starting to become, at least over here, there's starting to be more of, not with COVID because COVID has closed down everything, but whenever that's over, I think that there's been more of a spike in people creating spaces for brown people. And so it's like in July, this organization set up a time for just like non-binary Black and brown people to show up and just hang out and vibe. And it was a really good time, and it was outside and it was nice. And it's like things like that are starting to pop up more a little bit around me. So I'm hoping in the near future that it won't be the same where I feel barred from queer spaces. I'll have queer spaces to actually interact with people in. But as of right now, it's kind of rough. melding these two identities together.
Can I just say one thing on that as well? So sorry, so many good points. Yeah, I think as well actually with like COVID, I mean there are no plus sides to COVID, but something that's happened as a result of COVID is access has really been created for Black queer people in particular. I think that there are a lot of, so me living and growing up in London, I've kind of access to something that's very easy for me to get. So I kind of do hear and see these events quite often, but there are a lot of people that aren't necessarily able to get that. Any events that happen in London, if you live in like Radlett, is difficult to get to, have to pay for a train to get to London to sort of go to those events, which I think COVID has actually really helped a lot of people with, to be honest, which is genuinely very, very lovely to see. Yeah.
I think for me, I'm not sure. Like, I feel like it's more in artistic spaces, artistic queer spaces. Do I feel barred from, just because of the lack of Black queer artistry you see, that I then feel alienated and I'm like, oh my goodness. Or maybe in work as well, the idea that I might not get a role because I'm Black, or I might not get a role because I'm queer. It's real bit stressful. And our last question that we're going to end on, which I love, is what's the best part about being Black and queer? Yeah, that's a really nice question to end on.
Being Black and queer. That's the best part of being Black and queer. There are so many, like, this is like an elite club, yo. Like, we are so cool. Like, we have, every style comes from us, music comes from us, inspiration for pop culture comes from us. Like,
with the blueprint.
blueprint. And it's like, it doesn't get any better than that. Like, I've never once wanted to not be queer and wanted to not be Black. I understand there is sometimes when people feel that way, and I understand and acknowledge that and do not condemn that at all. But there are so many perks that come with being who I am that help me overlook the negatives, you know? I can dance, I have rhythm.
Automatically, Black and queer, 100%
Exactly.
can dance. I don't think I've met a Black queer person who can't dance.
Me neither.
It's pretty magical.
Think it's possible. It's exactly.
Even if they don't think they can dance, they can.
Yep. Exactly. So it's like I have no complaints. Just being myself is just like such a fun time. Like, there are so many experiences I get to have that other people don't get to have because they're not Black or brown or queer. Such as being awesome. Like, you can't be any more awesome than a queer person, a brown queer person, a Black or brown queer person. So that's what I think is the best part of being Black and brown and queer.
I think for me, it's all about community. The Black queer community, at least from what I've seen, we really show up for each other. There is so much love for people that you may have never met in your life, but you just want to love them by virtue of the fact that you share this identity. It's special. It's really special. Within that as well, like my chosen family, a lot of the people that I surround myself with are Black and queer now, and I would not go back and change that for the world. There's no part of my life that I think that I would change as well, because of the fact that I've lived my life as a Black queer person. So I don't know how, it sounds really weird to even say that, but like all of those experiences are formulating, and all those experiences have created me as I am now, and the people that I've met, all of it, it's just kind of like incorporated in that. But yeah, for me, the community is that for me, that the best part of being Black and queer is having that community that will always love you, always support you, and yeah, just always have your back.
Amazing. I think for me, it's that we have such an amazing, powerful, strong, rich culture and history that have been we've been all showing up for each other since the beginning of time, and we'll keep doing it because we're ride or die. And I love that, and I love that I get to be a part of that. Thank you guys so much for doing this. It's been amazing. It's been healing. It's been a wonderful safe space. If you guys feel free to plug your socials right now. Tell everyone who you are, what you're doing, your socials. Go for it. A shout out to anyone you love.
Thank you everyone for having me today. This was a lot of fun, and I really appreciated being able to talk about some important topics. Shameless plug, my Instagram is Space Obsidian. I'm in the process, as I said, I'm in the process of like applying for law school, so that's my focus right now. And at the same time, I'm also advocating very heavily for people who have like GoFundMe's and such. So if you have a GoFundMe you want me to like promote, please send it to my Instagram and I'll share it. Like that's kind of that's been the work I've been doing the most recently, is just like plugging everyone's crowd raising pages, just so that people who need help can get some help if they can't afford things. Yeah, give me a follow. I'm really cool to talk to. I'm American, so I'm like, we have a mess, but like I'm kind of cool. So like, if you want to hit me up, I need new friends. So
Hey guys, yeah, also thank you. Thank you for having me. It's been a very fun conversation actually. Yeah, I'm very, very tired. So apologies if I came across as somewhat sluggish or anything like that. I've got one main plug, which is my like socials, which is gavibes.cartel. So like Vibes Cartel, but with GA at the beginning because Gavin Gavibes. Yeah. I'm running. So I run events for Black and queer people, and have done quite a few panel discussions on what it means to be Black and queer in different scenarios or different experiences. And I actually have one event on Friday, which is a panel discussion on being Black and queer in the creative industry. If you're interested in that, give me a follow, and I'll be sharing details for it kind of throughout the week. Yeah, that's kind of through like my university's student union, so through SOAS SU. But yeah, if you follow me, you'll see all the information for it anyways. Cool, thank you guys.
So I've been your host. I'm Alaska. Thank you so much to everyone at GSA who asked me to do this. I've had the most fun, despite never having hosted before in my life. Thank you, Morny. Thank you, Goose. My plug is Alaska Fantasia with a Z. That's just my name. You might see me again on the 20th on the Black Arts panel, where I'll talk about being Black and doing art. So thank you so much. Thank you.